Hey guys, welcome to another session of Epic 7. This is my initial thoughts video for Edward Elric. But before we get started, a word from our sponsors today, Amazon Coins. As you may or may not know, Amazon Coins is a digital currency that you can use for in-game purchases in Epic 7 or any other apps found in the Amazon Appstore. Saving up to 20% off on purchases for the Full Metal Alchemist Brotherhood collaboration may just be what you need to secure a couple useful imprints and artifacts. Amazon Coins are currently available in the US, UK, Germany, France, Japan, Italy, Spain, and Australia. Use my link found in the description below to support me and the channel while getting these great discounts on your next in-game purchase. The link will also provide you step-by-step instructions on getting Amazon Appstore and Epic 7 installed on your device. With that out of the way, let's get into my thoughts on the FMA Brotherhood collaboration, starting with Edward. I have much to say on both collaboration heroes. On initial viewing, especially during the live stream, I was thoroughly impressed. And then, you start thinking about stuff and comparing to current heroes, what they're like, who they're kind of like, versus, who they're good against. And then you start having like a better sense of like where do they kind of fit, right? But of course, just like any of my initial thoughts videos, they're not perfect. Sometimes I get them off because like Summer Break Charlotte, for example, I thought she would be really crazy, but actually I'll talk about Summer Break Charlotte when I talk about the ML Pavel initial thoughts, because I would like to bring a comparison there. But either way, Edward Elric and Roy Mustang are the two summonable heroes this time around, and you know what? I think they did a really good job, right? Let's first talk about the art, right? Epic 7 always has this kind of like really consistent artwork where like I see the same quality here, same quality in the ReZero collab, same quality in the Slime collab, and then in Guilty Gear. They all don't feel like, even though like the shows have like slightly different nuances in terms of the art detail, Epic 7 somehow, I don't know what vendor they got to do the art for these collaboration heroes, but they're like very consistent, like facial proportions and stuff. So it's like you really believe that these characters are in the same universe, instead of like some gacha games usually like when they have a collab or whatever, the art can look vastly different from their like usual roster, or like the characters that the said IP actually owns, like the gacha games. So regardless, I always have to say this, like it's very impressive, and the animation of course very good. This is like some of the artwork that's featured on the Epic 7's official Edward Elric information video. So I'm just taking screenshots here. Now I do have to note that I'm actually gonna try to scale this up here on live. Winry up here, like up on the top, like she looks really freaking cute. And I did a double check too. I went on to like Google just to search. It's been a while since I watched Full Metal Alchemist Brotherhood, and Winry does not look that cute, man. So I am looking forward to next year. I mean, it doesn't matter if she's a free hero or not. I just like her to be a waifu, added into the collection. But I wanted to point that out. Winry looks really good there. Alphonse doesn't make it into this collaboration in terms of a standalone hero, but we do get to see him in the S3 animation, so I'm okay with that. I mean Alphonse is cool and all, but like he doesn't have a face, right? So it's like harder to sell, I suppose. We were joking before, like he'd be like Ethan's best friend or something. And then Roy and Riza Hawkeye there in the side, very nice image. I do like this. This is the art coming from the video, but this is the art used in the artifact. Also very nice rendering of it. I just had to take a screenshot of this because every time I don't know if it's like the exact same editing, but I mean this facial expression is awesome. I'm sure this is level 10. Level 10's facial expression. Usually it's like more comical or like special, but every single time at least for the video, every time we talk about his like average height or below average height, he makes this expression. So it's actually kind of I think it's like timed. You can see it at the end here as well. You see in the subtitles, he has an emotional complex about being shorter than average. It's always the same face, so I kind of like that because that's like literally the face he makes in the anime when people talk about his height, right? And he's just like, it's normal height, but But yeah, anyways, that's the joke. Anyways, I personally, if you know me personally, I'm not super tall, so I relate to Edward in that sense. But I don't get that angry. He is a fire warrior, so I'm kind of surprised, right? Like, so Roy Mustang, like, we were all guessing like, oh, he has to be fire mage, so we thought that default he'd be like earth warrior, because I mean, like, a lot of the times, including the S3 animation that he does, like, he literally pulls stuff out of the ground, right? So you would think like earth elemental would be interesting, because then you would have like both, you would have all three, like RGB in this one collaboration. You have Riza being ice ranger, and you have him being earth, but he's fire, and I'm okay, I guess, with fire, I suppose, but it's just more of like more of the, most of the debuffers you feel like you would run into would be like Ran and Peyra, right? So like, you know, they're ice, so it just feels kind of weird. Like, I know there are obviously, there's other debuffers of other classes, it's just that the prominent ones are like those, right? And then Sea Lilius needs to attack him, so it's not like the attack is during the debuff, so like Sea Lilius doesn't really count when you're talking about him as a counter to Sea Lilius. But either way, he is a fire elemental warrior, and he's Aries. So I did a double check. I'm like, I didn't remember the stat lines, I don't recognize those. One of my guildmates, he told me that he has similar kind of bulk to like a Rimuru. So like all day we were like, you know, putting some gear onto Rimuru, kind of trying to theory craft the build. He would have faster base speed though, Edward. So Aries warrior, this is new. Like, this is a brand new class. Or rather, brand new star sign for this class. I was looking in the journal, I couldn't find one, at least no 5-star equivalent, but if there is an existing one, even at a 3-star, do let me know in the comments down below. I didn't look as far because you wouldn't be able to use the same stat lines anyway, so to my knowledge, he is the first 5-star warrior to be an Aries star sign. At a speed of 117, I do believe that this clocks him as the second fastest warrior now, after Conqueror Lilius being at 121. I think the next fastest would be like Jkisei Mui, so that's like a 115, I believe. So 117 is the next fastest. Now, I don't know if his speed, like playing him a like really speedy build, would be super good. It could be. I already hear cleavers saying that, oh, let's just make Edward into part of their cleave comp, right? and then he'll kind of work out. I don't know about that, but you know, the RTA minds will put their different builds, different theory crafts all into work. Especially if one doesn't work, we're gonna see like varying builds, kind of like Summer Break Charlotte. So attack is kind of on the low side, but it's okay. It's perfect for him. Him being the premier of the Aries warriors, he is an HP scaling bruiser, so it's kind of perfect. The attack doesn't need to be in there. It doesn't have to be important. I think the attack there is like roughly around the same lines as like Alencia, and we know that Alencia is very effective without having to have like attack sided with it, so I'm gonna assume that Edward Elric also will have a higher HP ratio in terms of HP scaling over the attack scaling. Otherwise, you're gonna get some diminishing returns in terms of the stats and where you put the stats. 117 speed, like I said, is very impressive, being the second fastest right now. And then defense at 630, 637, I believe, is a bit lower than Rimuru, which is a Libra warrior. So Rimuru, LQC, those type. But it's like it's pretty much there. Like, this is pretty much a tank already, a tank build. It is obviously not the highest HP pool warrior, and nor does it compare to any really high HP like high HP knight. Like, this would be maybe like a Green Charles Mort type of stat line in terms of the bulk, which we know that it can work. He has 15% base crit rate, but his imprint concentration is at 16.8. Now, I was joking saying that, oh, maybe ML Pavel, this was like the night before the preview stream, I was saying to my stream chat, like, oh yeah, maybe ML Pavel will have like imprint for like crit rate, right? Like, you know, like you're gonna have to see like one crit rate self-imprinted hero once every like 2 hero releases or something, and it turns out it's on the limited banner. Now, this being on the limited banner, obviously it sparks a bit of controversy because, like, you know, it's kind of like Rem, right? Like, Rem having that extra, like having triple S, having the extra crit rate just made her way easier to build. I mean, like, even some people with the crit rate, because they're emphasizing some damage and hybrid the bulk, they can't even get 100% crit rate, like 97% or something like that. If you're one of them, you know, don't feel ashamed, because I was running my Rem triple S for a really long time and I just couldn't get the crit. And so like I feel like in the same way, it's just like, oh man, here we go again, right? Like, what if he's a very, very strong hero, but you really want to maximize like all that gear score? So for the free to play, or for people who don't get lucky and they're like light spenders, that's gonna be very unfortunate. I will have to say that his banner overall looks a bit better than Roy's at the moment. And of course, when I talk about Roy Mustang's very own in his own video, I will, you know, tell you guys what I think about that. But in terms of the artifact and hero, I think Edward Elric rates higher for me. So this banner is going to be the more expensive one. I would say that right now. Like, if anything, if Roy turns out to be really, really, really good, critical hit rate on Edward is still better, just in case if he gets buffed in the future. If he doesn't turn out to be that good, you're still gonna get more value out of it, and his artifact does seem to be pretty darn good. But let's talk about his kit. Enough of that intro. So skill 2, equivalent exchange. So after being attacked when the caster has a debuff, dispels one debuff and activates Rise. Can only be activated once per turn. Now once per turn is quite good, okay? Once per turn is quite good. But Rise reads, attacks all enemies with ground thorns, dispelling one buff and inflicting a random debuff for 2 turns, and the damage dealt increases proportion to the caster's max health. Now, first things first, let's talk about the situation again. So attacks all enemies with ground thorns, dispelling one buff and inflicting a random debuff. So it definitely has to hit. So in the example, they use like a Payra to run into him, and like I don't believe he actually missed. In one of the previous, he didn't miss. But if everything is like correct, like all the mechanics, there's like no hidden mechanic here, this technically should still miss ice heroes. Now, is that a super big deal? Let's say, for example, like, you know, Payra. I mean, for Payra's sake, I think it could be a big deal, because if you can get the random debuff and you get like a provoke or whatever, then she can't technically, you know, use escort, right? She can't use the S3. So like, there's that benefit, but I can kind of see like, yeah, I don't know. It's half, right? Because if one of my guildmates mentioned this too, if he was a green hero, the prominent ice heroes wouldn't be able to debuff him, right? Like, they would have a 50% chance to miss, and then therefore he doesn't get the debuff, and therefore Rise does not happen. I don't know which one I like better. I just feel like if he was meant to deal with Payra, deal with Ran, like, either they make him ice, which I guess would be still weird, I guess. Like, you know, if they made Taeyu ice for whatever reason, I guess they wouldn't make him ice. But anyways, like, it just feels like it has to be a 1-for-1. Or maybe in the future, if it does become kind of ineffective again, because the ice heroes more prominently are the better debuffers, or just pure ML, like, yeah, he might get buffed, where that this might ignore elemental disadvantage, kind of like Holiday Euphem's S1, right? Like, I don't think it's out of the question in the future, but that's just one concern I have. But outside of that, in my opinion, very strong. You got the random debuff for 2 turns, so 2-turn random debuff, like it's actually pretty insane in my opinion, because the random debuff it has decreased attack, decreased hit chance, provoke. All right, so the provoke and the silence for 2 turns, in my opinion, are like 2 of the biggest deals, especially when dealing with, let's say, hand guy. All right, but that assumes that hand guy doesn't get the turn before Edward gets the turn. You know what I mean? So but just in that example, I think a 2-turn provoke, pretty nasty. 2-turn silence, very nasty. If the team that you're running Edward into does not have some form of cleansing, then decrease attack, decrease hit chance, all good onto DPS. The silence, provoke, all good onto support and DPS together. The restrict part is probably the weakest out of the debuffs, but even in this case, I do believe that the debuffs available here are in a way better than, like, let's say F10 when F10 was released. Now F10, like, you know, obviously with like Syria Ren or Abyssal Crown, like, she did like really random stuff. Then you were usually aiming for the defense break. Like, that was the cream on the crop, right? That was the thing you were going for. This one, I just believe that all of them are also pretty good. Again, being 2-turn debuff, I think makes a huge difference in this case. And the provoke also being included, whereas like F10's redirected provoke was 1 turn, unbuffable was 2, but this one is like provoke can be 2 turns, even though it is a bit of RNG. Restrict could be good, although not necessarily the best. Everything else, like I said, would be all pretty awesome. Now I am doing this video before the data mine is released in terms of the damage mods, so a lot of the build considerations, in my opinion, will probably be affected by how you like how much the damage mods is. So like it depends on like how much more damage you want to emphasize instead of like maybe go for more bulk, right? And also his build, like is he on lifesteal set, is he on counter set, is he on injury set, is he on speed set? All those things come into play, I think, with our damage mods and damage calculator available, and that will probably come later. If it's not, I'll most likely add the damage mods once I figure it out into the video description below, so definitely check that out. Skill 3, I'll show you our difference. So attacks the enemy together with Alphonse, and of course this is when Alphonse and only when Alphonse is appearing, at least in this event, this collaboration, and increases combat readiness of the caster by 50%. When the enemy is not an elite or boss monster, damage sharing effects are ignored. Damage dealt increases proportional to the caster's max health, so again HP scaling. Damage dealt increases every time this skill is used and can stack up to 3 times. Now that will definitely require the damage mods to be able to tell us what that will become. A 10 soul burn will give a 2-turn reduction. If you +3 in terms of the Molagora, and most likely you're gonna +5. If you +3, then you have 4 turns. So 2-turn cooldown means that it's on a 2-turn. And if you stack it up to 3 times, depending again on how much damage it is, like we all know, like A Ravi, like with people dead on the field, A Ravi gets stronger and stronger, and A Ravi's S3, like being stacked 3 times versus like 0 stack or 1 stack, is a huge difference. Are we gonna see that with Edward? I'm not quite sure. But regardless, it does ignore damage sharing effect. So that part is like, you know, right now, like a lot of the single target damage dealers either have to have defense pen, like insanely high multipliers, or a really high nuke with some dispel debuff or something along those lines. And in this case, having it share the or ignore the damage share will also be a nice one. The ignoring damage share part would most likely be one for Para, but the second thing would be like this makes Edward into a potentially a decent threat into standard play. So I think that he probably has a place where people are pivoting down from like kind of like a cleave aggro draft to a standard play. I think that may be where he shines. But let's talk about the again S3 animation. So I took a couple of the screenshots here. Again, we got like a couple shots of Alphonse. Obviously I won't walk through the entire storyboard, just a couple of the highlights I felt was kind of interesting to bring up, especially in this video. This part was a bit scuffed. This part was like after Alphonse did his like kind of like punch, you see Edward fly into the air, and he's about to throw a lance down. You get this like kind of like cool hero shot, but this part was a bit scuffed. Now you guys know, like if you're watching my YouTube videos, you guys know my style. Like, you know, I like breaking down animation frame by frame, and this is what I found. At one frame it looked like this. Now if you do notice that his arm, or his hand rather, is actually kind of crooked. So hold on, let me do a like a little drawing here just to point it out. This wrist. Okay, so if you look at the before and after, there's something weird going on, and his stick or his lance, just this is frame by frame, by the way. You can see also his like legs, his pants, and all that stuff. It looks like it's like the sprite is flipped. You see how his hood kind of like goes into himself? So there's this one frame, and it's literally one frame out of all the beautiful animations. And trust me, like I'm not trying to hate on this at all. It's just sorry. When I was going through this caught my eye, and I don't think it can, you know, I can't let it go, right? But it's just one frame. out of hundreds of beautifully animated frames, it's just one frame that does this, and then immediately goes to something like this. So honestly, I don't think the regular person with the naked eye can actually catch that. But you know, you learn something new, right? So you know, my videos are somewhat educational. I love the intensity, of course. Again, like they did really well with the art. It looks very authentic, and in fact, I do believe that these actually look better than even the original animation. It's just my opinion. I watched both the Full Metal Alchemist, the original anime, the one that kind of departed from the manga, and then I watched Brotherhood. And Brotherhood style to me was I don't know how to say it. Like from an anime description perspective, the characters are not as pretty. That's how I would put it. And Epic 7, whichever vendor is like redoing these, you know, animations, they always make the characters look really good, pretty, in other words. This is a preview of the S3 damage from Edward Elric. He has attack buff in this, and you know, after he does the S3, like the description said that he will get a 50% CR boost, right? So that's really good to set up his turn again so that he can reset his S2. This of course ignores damage share. It does 9,000 to billion. Now that's like by itself, it's not really, you know, it's not good to determine like, is that really good? Is that the first stack? Or is this the third stack? I'm assuming it's first stack. And when they were previewing the S2 animation, when he did rise, it showed the rough damage it did to the rest of the team. It was like roughly around 2,000 to 3,000 damage, depending on the defense of that character. So if that is any, like if assuming the opponents in both skill descriptions are the same exact stats, which I believe they are, then you can at least safe to say that this does at least 3 times more damage than the S2. But the issue with these showcases is that like we never get the transparency, like, oh, what are the stats for the characters? What are the, even Mola, like I guess we could safe to say that it is plus 15. These dev accounts, like they have infinite resources, so like I'm assuming it's plus 15. So assuming it's plus 15 hero, then we have maximal S2, maximal S3. This is at least about 3 times, maybe almost 3.5 times as much damage. Because Rise is like an automatic triggered AoE skill, it's not like a cleaving skill, so you don't, you know, if you get silenced, you don't have the like for example RB, like if he's silenced he can't S3, so I would assume Rise S2, the damage mods will be lower than 1, maybe 0.9 or something like that. Not HP scaling, I'm talking about the equivalent to attack scaling. And then S3 would just be like maybe 1.3 or something like that. And that would probably be the difference, I'm assuming. But again, we won't know how much it scales per time it's used, the S3 that is, and then we don't know the damage mod. So there's a lot of unknowns, but if we're going to use some kind of comparison, at least you have that, about 3 times as much damage on the S3, even though escort is up, damage sharing is ignored, so escort did not absorb any of the damage. So if 9,000 is high to you, that's great. If 9,000 is low to you, that's, I guess, not as good, but it is what it is. Skill 1, I'll take you on, attacks the enemy with the transmuted blade, grants a berry to the caster for 1 turn, damage dealt and barrier strength proportional to the caster's max health. If you plus 4 this, you have you have up to a 25% more barrier strength on top of whatever the current barrier strength is. Now, again, assuming these showcases are plus 15 heroed, that means that this would have the full barrier. Now, I did do this, kind of doctored this part of the image just to highlight how much HP Edward has in this preview and how much of that barrier, you know, he has damage dealt to him. All right, you can see some HP missing from Pillis, from DN, from himself, of course, and then you see like a bit of that white bar on the barrier. Now, for those of you who don't know, sometimes, like, let's say I'm going into arena and there's an FCC comp, there's like a Ruel and there's like a Rimru and all that stuff. You can't tell their HP, like their actual HP numbers, but you can tell based on how thick the bar is, because the bar on top of the head, that displays a rough ratio of how much percent of the HP bar it's taking, right? So in the case of like, let's say regular arena, if I have an Opsig and I'm trying to see that, you know, who is the guaranteed S2 one-shottable target, I would usually try to choose the hero with the fattest, okay, the thickest white bar on the HP bar, because that means that the HP is lower, right? Because FCC gives a flat amount of HP. Now, with that being said, this is how I'm detecting a rough estimate on the barrier strength. That white portion on top of Edward's life bar, it looks to be about one, let me do a little drawing here. Okay, it looks to be about one like increment on the HP bar itself. I don't know if you guys can see that, the two red lines I drew there, but one increment of it, which means it would be 10%. So we have basically 5 increments of the HP bar, and there's like a middle bar that's 50% HP obviously, and so that's safe to assume that each increment is 10%. So if the barrier looks to be about one section of the HP bar, that means it's 10% of the HP, which is pretty good. That means that if you got a 20,000 HP Edward, every S1 he does is a 2,000 HP barrier. So that to me sounds pretty darn good, especially when he gets the S1 off. Now, with that being said, well, does that make him, you know, usable as a counter hero? I think maybe technically a bit of low value on the counter part in my opinion, but just being like having his base speed at being a 117 means that it can open up other sets without really diminishing too much of his gear score. And like I said, if you have the ability to triple S him, or rather I should say luxury, if you have the luxury to triple S him, what you will see is obviously a way better Edward, because you could be on lifesteal, you could be on injury, you can be on counter, and you can most likely hit 200 speed, maybe like 190 plus, almost 200 speed, and you'll be able to have like kind of like the 20,000 HP, the, you know, 1300 defense with like 270, 280 crit damage, and with 100% crit rate. So that sounds pretty good, on top of the fact that his artifact seemingly does seem to be really good, especially if you want a sustaining fight. Maybe build him on lifesteal set. If not on lifesteal set, he is a warrior, which means he has access to something like Sigurd's Scythe. Now, I know that Sigurd's Scythe is more attack scaling and benefits a lot with attack scaling warriors, but you know, I've seen like, you know, Sigurd's Scythe used on Lionheart Sirmia, used on Dilibet, and in the right conditions, especially if they do AoE, it can heal quite a bit. So in the same case with Edward, depending on the S2 mod, when he does rise, retaliates with the debuffs, like, is that enough to heal back a lot with Sigurd's Scythe? If that's the case, then I almost suggest that you maybe could run him on Sigurd's Scythe if you have a spare. Sigurd's Scythe on injury set, just because I feel like right now Alencia is very strong obviously on injury. My SSB is on injury. I know a lot of people think that's like really copium, but I choose SSB when there's like a lot of HP scaling bruisers, like, you know, Aravi, Crow, and all that stuff, and so I get like a benefit from the injury itself. So I'm kind of like an injury lover. I almost always have been. I don't know, man. Depends on what kind of gear I can get. Maybe injury set, counter set. Again, you would only get it for the barrier, and I don't know if that's enough. So I think lifesteal set becomes the next, what I would so-called bruiser set, because it gives you additional benefits for being a bruiser. Lifesteal set could be a real like viable option. If the S3 is really strong as well, you get a lot of lifesteal from that, the lifesteal from the S2, and then you got the barrier to protect yourself, giving the lifesteal extra value. So I think a lifesteal set might be the go-to if you've got the gear. I only have kind of speed set left over, unfortunately, but you can run them on crit set. So with crit set, you would just get more gear score, because ideally you don't want immunity, right? He will kind of function like a champion Zerato in that sense. But in my opinion, because of him being HP scaling, because of his high base HP defense, and his ability to be self-imprinted with crit rate, and access to potentially this artifact, might be his best in slot, depending on what kind of build. He's better than Champion Zerato. He will be more sustainable in longer fights than Champion Zerato, because he just does more, right? Like, not just being able to throw the debuff back at the the characters, but he'll be able to apply new different types of debuffs to characters that may be weak to this type of debuff. Now that being said, I think let's talk about the artifact. I think the artifact is a really good one. Okay, they had recently buffed Alensa Nox's Wrath. If you could get 5 more crit rate on your Alencia, this could be the next best in slot. So with the with CR boosting is all good on Alensa Nox's Wrath, but this gives you speed, like it can stack up to 4 times. So really we're talking about 32% critical hit damage like extra, and 32% speed after an extra attack. And because Alencia guarantees the extra attack every single turn she has unless she has unbuffable, this becomes a very, very strong Alencia artifact. But that being said, like, could it be used for Shu? Maybe a bit, like maybe not so much for Shu, because like the extra attack is not guaranteed on in her case. And even in Edward's case, really, like if people choose not to debuff you, then he doesn't do rise and therefore he doesn't stack. But no matter what, this artifact gives you an additional 10% crit rate, so that alleviates at least around 2 gear rolls that you could put into anything else: HP, defense, crit damage, or even speed itself. So I think that this artifact, you know, like back when Rimru's artifact, the magic mask, was released, I'm like, oh, this is really good, and warrior artifacts are really lacking. Now all of a sudden a ton of warrior artifacts are just like really strong. Snow Crystal, Alensa Nox's Wrath in my opinion for Alencia, Durandal, I'm using it on Lionheart Sirmia. I can't wait for Durandal to get slightly buffed, that'd be great too. Draco Plate of course will always be one of the fan favorites. But this artifact may be good, especially if warriors are just going to continue having extra attacks in the coming future. Now that being said, Edward, you know, it will still somewhat get countered by like Lionheart Sirmia, even ML Kawazu to a degree, because you know once he actually retaliates back, it's AoE. ML Kawazu goes into immunity, assuming you have the EE. Rowana becomes a counter too. So this is where I feel that, you know, if I were to balance him into the meta right now, HP scaling bruisers, if you play standard or you play very bulky, HP scaling bruisers are really good. We're always trying to find more HP scaling bruisers that are better. The issue is that if Fire Ravi, you know, almost hardly has a play, like does Edward really have a spot? Now Fire Ravi is not really an HP scaling bruiser, but I almost put her in that category because most people just allow her attack passive from her Demon Blood, the S2, to stack to gain the attack, and everyone usually focuses on the bulk anyway. Shu being so prominent as an ice hero, that can cause an issue versus Edward, and Shu does not do debuffs, so Edward does not benefit from his passive as well. Now that being said, like I said, I think the artifact is great. Him, you know, having some potential for sure. Again, I think the damage mods will definitely lean him towards more usable. You know, sometimes the damage mods are so good, you just toughen through it, right? It's kind of like some people bring Shu into Violet, you know, like they don't ban Violet just because they pick Shu. It's just because Shu does so much that Violet might not even be a hard counter. So I feel like Edward is kind of waiting for that. The damage mods, how much his S3 stacks, those things I think can put some of the I guess some of the unease I have at rest. And I think that's what we need to see. I think that's what we need to wait to see. But again, like I said, comparing the two, Roy versus Edward, I do believe that Edward off the bat has more areas to be experimented with already, more than Roy. But wouldn't it be interesting though if Roy turns out to be the hidden gem of this collab? Anyways, that's my initial thoughts for Edward Elric with the Full Metal Alchemist Brotherhood collab. Let me know what you guys think in the comments down below. Do you think he's really broken, or how do you plan to use him? Let me know your ideas, and you know, I will be pulling for him because he's limited, and I think his artifact is definitely, no matter what, no matter how I look at it, it's just really high value. So yeah, anyways, I'm gonna end this for the video recording. If you guys have Discord, check out the Discord server, follow me on Twitter, subscribe to YouTube if you haven't, and as always, thank you guys for watching, and I will see you guys next time.